When this veteran exposed the government's failure, Pam Bondi had two choices: walk away or fight back. She chose the one no one expected. The conference room at the Tampa Convention Center was packed. Rows of reporters, flashing cameras, and murmuring onlookers filled the space. Pam Bondi stood behind the podium, polished as ever, her signature blonde hair neatly styled, her expression unreadable. She adjusted the microphone, cleared her throat, and prepared to address the topic dominating headlines for weeks: veteran healthcare funding cuts. This wasn't just another press event. The air was thick with frustration and distrust. People weren't just here to listen. They were here to push back. "Good afternoon," Bondi began, her voice even and controlled. "I understand there have been concerns about recent policy adjustments. I want to take a moment to clarify the facts." A sharp voice cut her off. "Clarify? We don't need clarification. We need action." The crowd shifted. Eyes snapped toward the speaker, a man wearing a faded Vietnam veteran cap, its stitching frayed. His lined face and firm grip on the chair in front of him spoke of years of service and struggle. Bondi paused, pressing her lips together. Security near the doors tensed. Reporters leaned in. The man's voice wavered but carried weight, the kind that comes from being overlooked for too long. "My name is Richard Lawson, served 24 years in the U.S. Army, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. I came home and found myself fighting a different war, the one right here. The VA won't return calls. My buddies can't get the care they were promised. And now you're telling us we need to cut back?" A few nodded. Others muttered. The camera zoomed in. Bondi exhaled. "Mr. Lawson, I respect your service." "I don't need your respect," he interrupted. "I need my brothers to stop dying in hospital hallways because of red tape." His voice cracked, but he pushed through. "You politicians love shaking our hands during elections. But when we come to you for help, suddenly there are budget constraints." A hush settled over the room. Even the reporters stopped typing. Bondi shifted, her fingers tightening on the podium. This was bigger than a tense exchange. But instead of deflecting, as many expected, she did something no one saw coming. She stepped away from the podium, just enough to make it clear she wasn't hiding behind it. She met Lawson's eyes. "You're right," she said, her voice steady but lower now. "We do a lot of talking, but I want to hear your reality. Right now, tell me exactly what you and your fellow veterans are dealing with." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't a political dodge. She was throwing it back to him. Lawson hesitated as if he hadn't expected her to actually listen. Then, rubbing the stitching of his cap, he took a deep breath. "I had a friend, Mike Davidson, Marine, served in Desert Storm. A year ago, he started having chest pains. Nothing major at first, just some tightness. He went to the VA. They told him it was stress, sent him home with ibuprofen. 2 months later, he collapsed in his kitchen. His wife found him. Massive heart attack. Turns out it wasn't stress. It was a blocked artery. But because he was just another name on a waiting list, he didn't get the tests he needed, the surgery he needed. And now he's dead." Silence. Lawson swallowed hard. "That's one story. You want more? I got plenty. Like my buddy Ray, Vietnam vet, lost his leg in '68. Last year, he got an infection in his prosthetic socket. Went to the VA, sat in the waiting room for 8 hours. By the time they saw him, the infection had spread. They took the rest of his leg. He's in a nursing home now. Guy used to be the toughest man I knew. And now he's wasting away in a damn recliner because the system failed him." Bondi's posture shifted, less stiff, less defensive. Lawson exhaled. "I don't need pity. I just want an answer. How did we go from being called heroes to being treated like burdens?" Bondi took a slow step forward. "I don't have an easy answer, Mr. Lawson, and I won't insult you by pretending I do." He folded his arms. "Then what are you going to do?" Bondi didn't look at her staff, didn't check with advisors. Instead, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small notepad and flipped it open. "I want names," she said. "I want cases, real people, real situations. And I want to take them straight to the people in charge of fixing this." Lawson blinked. "You what?" "You said the system is broken. I want to see exactly how, where, And why? The energy in the room shifted. Lawson stared at her, trying to decide if this was political theater or something real. Then slowly he nodded. Fine. I'll start with Mike Davidson's widow. You want her number? Bondi extended her notepad. I do. The cameras caught every moment. Lawson scrawling the number, Bondi's fingers tightening around the notepad, as if she understood the weight of what she had just set in motion. But not everyone in that room believed she meant it. By the time Bondi walked off that stage, the internet had already erupted. Clips of the confrontation flooded social media. Some called it political theater, others saw real leadership. But everyone was talking. By that evening, major news outlets were running headlines. Pam Bondi faces off with veteran, then shocks everyone. Former AG calls VA office live. Is she serious or playing the game? Veterans speak out after bombshell press conference. Veterans across the country flooded comment sections with their own stories. Some were furious, echoing Lawson's belief that politicians only cared when cameras were rolling. Others felt something they hadn't in years: hope. Bondi spent the next 48 hours making calls to VA offices, congressional contacts, anyone with power. Her staff was overwhelmed, blindsided by the mix of backlash and praise. Then late at night, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then she answered. This is Director Mason. Her grip tightened. Glad to hear from you, Director. I assume you know why I'm calling? A sigh. You put me in a hell of a position today, Bondi. No, I didn't. Your office did that when they let Angela Hayes' claim disappear. A pause, then. We're reopening her case. Effective immediately. Bondi's lips pressed into a thin line. And the others? Mason hesitated. That's complicated. We have thousands of pending appeals. I can't just push them all through overnight. Then let's start with a real review. A long silence. Then Mason's next words made her sit up straight. You want real change? Take this fight to Congress. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Pam Bondi sat in her office, staring at the notepad filled with veterans' names. Was this just another political moment? Or was she about to step into a fight even she wasn't ready for? Her phone buzzed. A text from Lawson. If you're serious about this, I'll stand with you, but you better not back out. She stared at the message for a moment before replying. Pam Bondi, I don't back out. A month later, Bondi sat in Washington, waiting to testify before Congress. The notepad was still with her, but now it wasn't just names, it was proof. And as she stepped inside the chamber, she knew one thing. The fight had just begun.